That's the sentence that keeps looping in my head every time I unlock the repair shop door in the morning. I don't even know who I'm trying to convince when I think it. Myself? Maybe. Or her. But she's not here, and the place feels too quiet without the way she used to say my name, low and careful, like she wasn't sure she should be saying it at all. The shop is nothing special. Concrete floor, metal shelves, parts stacked in a way that only makes sense to me. The old AC rattles like it's trying to give its last performance. Most days, customers come in with busted fans or scooters that smell like burnt oil. No one lingers. No one asks questions. Except her. She came in 3 months ago with a chipped side mirror on her silver sedan. I remember that detail because her car was polished like she wiped it down every morning, yet the mirror looked like it had been scraped against a wall by someone too distracted to notice, or someone who had bigger things on her mind. She walked in with that same contradiction, calm posture, but guarded eyes. Mid-40s, maybe a little older, but she carried herself like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. That alone was new to me. Most people my age try too hard. I try too hard. She didn't. I didn't know her then, but I know her now. Or at least, the version of her she let me see. Today, the shop door chimes, and for half a second my stupid heart jumps. Like she might finally walk back in, ask why I didn't call, or why I didn't stop her from leaving town the way she did. But it's just a delivery guy who leaves a box and doesn't even make eye contact. I set the package aside and find myself staring at the spot where she used to stand, right by the workbench, one hand resting lightly on the counter, fingers tapping out a rhythm she probably didn't even notice. The first time she did that, I couldn't focus on anything but the way her ringless hand moved. She caught me staring, and instead of looking away, she held my gaze for a second too long. Just a second, but enough to make the air feel thicker. "You're, what, 20? She'd asked then, with a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. 22, I'd said, then added, almost 23, even though the extra words made me sound younger, not older. She'd laughed softly, like she knew exactly what I was trying to do. And I think that was the first moment something shifted. Not romance. Nothing that clear. Just the recognition of something unspoken. Something neither of us named. She didn't talk much, not at first. She listened more than she spoke, and sometimes her silences felt louder than my rambling. I remember explaining why her mirror would take a couple of hours to fix or talking about a model I'd been restoring, and she'd tilt her head slightly, like she saw more in my words than I meant to share. But the moment that stuck with me, the one I keep replaying, happened the evening she brought in her car for the last time. She'd stayed until closing, leaning over the hood while I tightened the last screws. The shop lights were harsh, but somehow she still managed to look steady, unshaken. Long day, I'd asked, wiping my hands on a cloth. She opened her mouth to answer, but hesitated, eyes drifting to the dark parking lot outside. Something like that, she murmured. When I handed her the keys, her fingers brushed against mine. Slow, intentional, but also uncertain. She didn't pull away immediately, and I didn't either. For a heartbeat, it felt like we were standing right at the edge of something we weren't allowed to name. Then she let go, whispered, "Thank you," and walked out with her shoulders a little tighter than when she came in. I thought she'd be back. She always came back. But the next morning, someone told me she'd packed up her place, emptied it out overnight. No forwarding address. No note. Just gone. And that moment, that tiny brush of her fingers against mine, won't leave me alone. The storm came down fast, the kind that makes the streetlights flicker and the gutters overflow in minutes. I was sweeping water away from the shop entrance when her headlights cut through the rain. She parked crooked, like she hadn't even tried to straighten the car. I didn't have time to pretend I wasn't hoping it was her. She hurried toward the open door, jacket pulled over her head. Raindrops slid down her cheekbones, not exactly tears, but close enough that for a second I wondered. "Sorry," she said as she stepped inside, brushing water from her sleeves. "I know you're closing. You always show up right when the weather's about to ruin my night." I joked, trying to keep my voice from giving anything away. She didn't laugh this time. She just exhaled slowly, grounding herself with one hand on the counter. "Can I stay here for a bit?" she asked. There was something fragile in her tone, hidden under the practiced calm. I nodded and locked the door behind her. She noticed me turning the key, and her eyes flickered. Not fear, something else. Awareness. We sat on opposite sides of the workbench at first. The storm hammered the tin roof. She pulled her damp hair back and leaned forward, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor like she was working up to something. You ever feel like you're running from nothing? She asked. Sometimes, I said. Sometimes I think I'm chasing nothing too. That made her look at me. Really look. A long, searching kind of attention that made my throat go tight. You shouldn't, she murmured. You're too young to already feel that stuck. I shrugged. Doesn't feel like age matters much. She smiled. A small, tired curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. But it was still the most honest expression she'd given me all night. I made us tea on the portable kettle. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she needed something warm to hold on to. When she thanked me, her voice was softer than the rain. We talked, or she talked more than usual. She told me about a mistake she made years ago, one that cost her more than it should have. She didn't give details, just that one line. But her fingers curled tightly around the mug, and her jaw clenched like she was holding back rest. People make mistakes, I said quietly. Not the kind that follow you, she replied. She was closer to me now, leaning against the bench, shoulders dropping inch by inch. I could feel the heat of her body through the storm-cooled air. It felt like she was drifting into my space without meaning to. Or maybe she did mean to. Lightning flashed, and for a moment she looked almost startled by how near we'd gotten. Her knee brushed mine, barely, but enough to stop my breath. She didn't pull back. Neither did I. Something hovered there, sharp and delicate. A confession about to break free. A line we both knew better than to cross. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. A man's name lit up the screen. She stared at it too long, long enough for me to register the tightening in her throat. She didn't answer, but the moment was already ruined, bent, threatened. She set the phone face down and whispered, I shouldn't be here. The words hit me harder than they should have. But she didn't move. She just lifted her eyes to mine, hesitating, as if waiting for me to say something that would make staying okay. I almost did. I almost reached for her hand, just to steady the shaking she was trying so hard to hide. But the storm cracked again, loud, startling, and we both flinched. The spell broke. Her breath caught. Half step forward, half step back, stuck between leaving and staying. And then, she took one slow step toward me. Not enough to close the distance. Just enough to make every inch of air between us feel charged, waiting for a decision neither of us dared to make. The storm eased, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the thunder. She was still standing there, close enough that if either of us breathed too deeply, we'd touch. Her hair clung to her temples, damp from the rain, and her eyes kept flicking to my mouth, then away, like she regretted every impulse she couldn't control. I wiped my palms on my jeans, pretending I wasn't shaking. You're awfully quiet, she said, though her voice wasn't steady either. I'm trying not to say something stupid. She gave a hollow laugh, one short breath that didn't sound like amusement at all. She stepped closer, then stopped herself, fingers curling around the workbench edge as if she needed the anchor. Tell me anyway, she whispered. Her invitation wasn't gentle. It was tired, worn, like she didn't have the energy to keep pretending this was nothing. I exhaled slowly. I keep thinking there's something here, and every time I almost believe it, you disappear again. Her breath hitched. She closed her eyes for a moment, long lashes trembling. That's not fair, she said softly. I know. I'm not trying to trap you into an answer. You kind of are. Then tell me what we're doing. There. I'd said it. The question neither of us had let ourselves touch. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since I'd known her, they weren't guarded. They were terrified. Not of me, of herself. I don't know, she murmured. The words wavered. She straightened her shoulders, like she was forcing herself not to crumble. But her hands betrayed her, knuckles white, fingers twitching like she wanted to reach for me and stop herself in the same breath. You're too young to get pulled into whatever this is, she said. You don't understand the consequences. That's not your choice, I said quietly. She flinched, not because the words were sharp, but because they were true. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no sound came out. The room hummed with the electricity of everything unsaid. I shouldn't have come tonight, she whispered. You did. And that's the problem. The storm had settled into a faint patter. The shop lights buzzed. Somewhere in the back room, water dripped from a loose pipe, steady, rhythmic, too loud in the stillness. She took a small step back, then leaned forward again, conflicted in a way that made my chest ache. You make things complicated, she said, voice breaking on the last word. Because I care? I asked. No, she said, shaking her head. Because I do. My breath caught. She wasn't supposed to say that. She knew it. I knew it. The admission hung between us, trembling, fragile, dangerous. She paced away, only 2 steps, but it felt like losing something warm. This can't happen, she said. It shouldn't happen. I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I come here because it feels. Her voice cracked. I waited. She swallowed hard, then finished. It feels like I can breathe around you. The words left her, soft and devastating. She didn't look at me. She stared at the floor, at her own hands, anywhere but my face. Like saying it out loud had cost her something she wasn't ready to lose. And then, in barely a whisper, tell me I'm imagining all of this so I can walk away. The way she said, tell me I'm imagining all of this, was supposed to give me an exit, a clean one. Something simple. Something I could nod to, pretend with, let her walk out unhurt. But I couldn't answer right away. My chest felt tight in a way that made words dangerous. She waited. Not patient, braced. Before I could speak, her phone buzzed again. Same name flashing across the screen. She shut it off entirely this time, like even seeing his name was a burn. She pressed her palms to her eyes, exhaling shakily. I should go, she said. But she didn't move. She stood so still she could have been carved from the silence. Something in me tightened. I stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough that she could feel I wasn't turning away. You're not imagining it, I finally said quietly. Her hands fell, and she stared at me like she wished I'd lied. Like truth was the last thing she could handle. But instead of breaking, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed, once, short, breathless, and shook her head. I knew you'd say that, she murmured. God, I knew it. Not anger. More like resignation. Or relief she didn't want. She walked past me, toward the tool rack. Not to grab anything, just to put space between us. Her fingers ghosted over the metal drawers, tracing ridges like she needed something solid to touch. I need to show you something, she said suddenly. I froze. Okay. It's nothing dramatic. Don't think I'm about to unload some tragedy. Her voice was thin, strained at the edges. I just want you to understand why I'm like this. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded photograph, worn at the corners, creased like it had been opened too many times. She held it out, but didn't look at me. Not once. I took it. A young guy, maybe a year older than me, smiling with that effortless confidence people have before life teaches them otherwise. His arm was around her, but not romantically, more like family, trust, comfort. He was my nephew, she said before I could ask. Not by blood, really. His mom and I were best friends since we were kids. So he grew up calling me, and even though I wasn't. She paused, inhaling slowly. He was 25 when he died. My throat tightened. I'm sorry. She nodded once. He used to come to me for everything. Advice, stupid questions, even when he pretended he didn't need it. A faint, cracked smile touched her mouth. He talked too much when he was nervous. Just like you. I swallowed hard. And I remind you of him. No, she said quickly, too quickly. Not in the way you think. You have his restlessness. His sincerity. That look like you're trying to carry more than you should. Her voice dropped. It scares me. Why? I asked. Because I failed him, she whispered. The words hit the air like a confession she'd never meant to say. She gripped the edge of the tool bench, knuckles whitening. He died in an accident, she continued. And he'd called me that night. I didn't pick up. I told myself I was tired, that I'd call him back in the morning. Her breath shuddered. There wasn't a morning. I stepped closer before I could think. Not touching her, just close enough that she didn't have to say the next part alone. I know it's not the same, she said, voice crumbling around the truth. But every time you look at me like you trust me, like I matter, she shook her head, eyes shining in the dim light. I feel the same fear in my chest, that I'm going to fail you too. I didn't reach for her. I didn't say the obvious comforts people say. I just stood there, letting the weight of her past settle between us, reshaping everything I thought I understood. She finally looked up at me, eyes red, jaw trembling, and in the softest, most earth-shaking whisper, she said, "Please don't make me lose someone twice." The photograph lay between us on the workbench, edges soft from years of being held too tightly. She wasn't crying, not exactly. Her face was too controlled for that. But something in her posture had dropped, like she'd finally put down a weight she'd been holding for far too long. "I shouldn't have said all that," she murmured, rubbing the heel of her palm against her forehead. "You didn't ask for any of it." "I didn't need to ask," I said. "You needed to say it." She let out a sound, not a sob, not a laugh. Something in between. She turned her head slightly, like she was trying to steady herself before she looked at me again. "Do you understand now?" she whispered. "Why I pull back? Why I disappear?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I do." She exhaled slowly, shoulders loosening as if my understanding, not approval, just understanding, was something she'd been bracing herself against. The storm had faded to a soft drizzle outside. The shop felt strangely warm, as if the air itself was exhausted from holding everything in with us. "You're not him," she said, eyes dropping to the photo. "I know that. I do. But when you talk, when you look at me like I'm someone worth trusting," her voice thinned. "I don't know how to hold that without breaking something." I hesitated before answering, not because I didn't know what to say, but because anything too big would ruin the fragile honesty between us. "You don't have to hold anything," I said quietly. "Just be here. Be here," she repeated, almost as if testing the words. "Do you know how hard that is for me?" I didn't. Not really. But the tremble in her hand as she brushed a finger along the bench told me enough. So I didn't step closer. I didn't touch her. I just let the space between us breathe. She finally moved, just a small shift, closing half a step of the distance. Not a choice as much as a surrender. "Every time I come here," she said softly, "I tell myself I won't stay long, that I'll keep things simple, safe. But then I see you, and everything in me quiets." My chest tightened, not with excitement, but with something slower, heavier, more certain. She lifted her eyes to mine. Steady, bare, vulnerable in a way she'd never allowed before. "I don't want to run anymore," she whispered. "But I don't know how not to." "That's okay," I said. "We can stand still for a minute." Her breath caught, a fragile, hopeful sound. So I sat down first, on the old wooden stool by the bench, giving her a chance to walk away if she needed to. She didn't. She came closer, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. Then she eased onto the second stool beside me, leaving barely an inch between our knees. Not touching, just sharing space. It felt like more than touch. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers tense. Mine hung loosely at my sides. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. After a long moment, her fingers shifted, barely, until the side of her hand brushed mine. Not a grip, not an invitation, just a quiet acknowledgement. "I'm here." I let my pinky graze hers in return. A tiny, trembling contact. The softest collapse into something neither of us dared to name. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The shop hummed. The world felt still. She inhaled, a slow, careful breath, and said in a voice so small it almost vanished, "Don't leave before I'm ready to lose you." I think about that night sometimes, not because of what happened, but because of what finally made sense afterward. It's strange how two people can circle around a truth for so long, pretending they don't see it, pretending it doesn't see them. But eventually, something gives, something shifts, and you look back and realize, that was the moment everything quietly changed. For them, it wasn't a kiss, or a confession, or some dramatic turning point people write poems about. It was smaller, softer, almost forgettable to anyone else. But not to them, never to them. They sat together in that dim room, both looking a little tired, a little undone, and maybe a little relieved. Not relieved because anything was solved, Nothing was, not really, but relieved because the pretending was over. The space between them wasn't crowded with questions anymore. Just honesty. Quiet, steady, unflinching honesty. I remember the way she exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for months. And the way he looked down at his hands, as if they suddenly mattered. As if he didn't trust them not to shake. Something about that vulnerability, the kind that doesn't ask for pity, just understanding, stayed with me. And this is the part people don't talk about. Love doesn't always arrive loudly. It doesn't always sweep you up in fireworks or pull you into cinematic confessions. Sometimes it shows up like this, in the soft aftermath of a hard truth, in the silence that finally feels safe, in the presence of someone who doesn't ask you to be anything but real. That night didn't fix them. It didn't erase their pasts or their fears or the bruises they never talked about. But it changed the direction of everything. She softened, not because she needed him, but because for once she let herself be seen without armor. He steadied, not because she saved him, but because her honesty gave him permission to stop running from his own. They didn't promise each other forever. They didn't even promise tomorrow. What they did promise, quietly, almost accidentally, was to keep showing up, to keep choosing that silence, that honesty, that space where neither of them had to hide. And maybe that's what love really is. Not the grand gestures, not the dramatic lines, just the quiet decision to stay, even when staying scares you. Looking back, I realize how rare that kind of connection is. How fragile, how powerful, and how easily it could have been missed if either of them had blinked at the wrong moment. But they didn't. They let it happen. They let themselves happen. And in the end, that was enough. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?